The silence in Examination Hall 12 stretched tight as a drawn wire. 23 of the Zenthari War Academy's finest cadets had finished their tactical analysis papers 30 minutes earlier. Their answers sat in neat stacks, precise, disciplined, and painfully predictable. Each one repeated the same approved siege doctrines straight from the Academy's sanctioned textbooks. Then there was the human. Liam sat alone in the back corner, still writing. His stylus moved across the digital tablet with calm, unhurried confidence, as if time were unlimited. It wasn't. The exam carried a strict 2-hour limit, and they were already past it. Instructor Vayer Zion observed from his raised platform, mandibles clicking with restrained irritation. The human had been a complication since the first day of the exchange program. Not rude. Not incompetent. Something worse. Interesting. Time, Instructor Vector announced, his voice carrying the authority of 20 cycles in the Zenthari military. 23 cadets powered down their tablets instantly. Liam kept writing. Cadet Liam. Vector's secondary throat sac inflated slightly, a warning any Zenthari recognized. The examination period has concluded. Liam looked up, blinking as though surfacing from deep thought. Oh. Sorry about that. Just finishing the classified example section. He tapped the stylus lightly against his lips. Quick question though. When you asked about siege tactics, did you want ancient, modern, or classified methods? The room froze. Not the comfortable silence of completed exams. The kind that arrives just before someone says something career-ending. Vayer's 4 eyes narrowed. Cadet, the parameters were clearly defined. Historical siege tactics from approved galactic military doctrine. Right. But which historical period? Liam asked, genuinely curious, as if discussing lunch options. I've got examples covering about 8,000 years. The approaches shift a lot depending on whether we're talking pre-industrial, conventional, modern warfare, or he paused, glancing around. The other stuff. The other stuff? Vayer's voice dropped to a hiss. Liam gestured casually. The things we don't usually bring up in polite company. War crimes. Illegal weapons. Strategies that violate, 15 different galactic conventions. That kind of classified. 23 alien faces turned toward him, some fascinated, some horrified. War Coordinator T. Corvin, observing from the rear of the hall, felt her battle-hardened instincts tighten. Vector's claws extended slightly without conscious thought. Cadet, Vector began carefully, you will submit your examination immediately and report to. Actually, I'm done. Liam powered down his tablet and stretched, joints popping audibly. Just wanted to be sure I was covering the right material. I mixed all 3 approaches, ancient, modern, and classified. Seemed more comprehensive. He rose and walked toward the front of the hall with easy confidence, the stride of someone who had just aced a routine quiz, not ignited a potential interstellar crisis. Oh, and Instructor Zion, he added, pausing at the platform. You might want to expand your reference materials. The Galactic Military History Archive is missing some major conflicts. I understand why, most of them ended badly, but without them, defensive context gets incomplete. He placed his tablet on the submission stack. The soft click echoed through the chamber like distant artillery. Thanks for the extra time. See you next week. He left as casually as if heading to lunch. Behind him, 23 future officers sat in stunned silence. 2 veteran instructors stared at the tablet resting on the pile, an object that might contain either the most brilliant tactical analysis in Academy history, or a detailed confession of war crimes predating galactic civilization. War Coordinator Corvin was already reaching for her emergency communicator. Her fingers hovered over Academy Command, shifted to Galactic Military Intelligence, then to the direct line for the Zenthari High Council. She didn't know who to call first. The tablet sat harmlessly on the stack, its dark screen reflecting the overhead lights. Inside, nearly 4,000 words of analysis waited to be read, covering 8 millennia of siege tactics, citing conflicts absent from official records, and discussing strategies that would violate nearly every convention of civilized warfare. All written by an exchange student who spoke of potential war crimes as casually as weather patterns. Vayer's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the device. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The emergency meeting convened at 3118 hours in Conference Room Alpha Prime, the Academy's most secure briefing chamber. War Coordinator Corvin had managed exactly 43 minutes of sleep before Instructor Zion's frantic message pulled her from her quarters. "Show me," she said immediately. Zion activated the tablet. A holographic projection rose above the conference table. Text scrolled past in precise academic formatting, structured sections, proper citations, flawless organization. It was the kind of paper any instructor would praise. If it weren't terrifying. "He begins with conventional approaches," Zion said carefully. "Standard siege escalation protocols from the hegemony wars. Textbook material." The display shifted. Section 2, Modern Applications. General Max the Lawn, dragged from bed for this crisis session, leaned forward. "Define modern." "Anything within the last 2,000 years, Zion replied, mandibles clicking rapidly. He references something called the Stalingrad Protocol. Claims it demonstrates how industrial-era urban warfare can adapt to modern shield grid scenarios. Corvin felt her stomach tighten. Stalingrad isn't in our databases. None of his references are, analyst Zara Voss confirmed from the data terminal. "I've searched for an hour. The Battle of Thermopylae. The Siege of Constantinople. Something called D-Day." She looked up slowly. "Zero matches in the Galactic Military Archives." "Maybe he's inventing all of it," General Valand said, a note of hope creeping into his voice. Zion didn't respond. He activated another segment of the display. Section 3, Historical Context and Strategic Innovation. The text scrolled across the holographic screen. While the 300 Spartan defenders at Thermopylae ultimately lost the tactical engagement, their strategic use of terrain and controlled retreat established a defensive model that influenced military doctrine for the next 2,500 years. Similar principles appear in the failures of the Maginot Line in 1940, the Viet Cong tunnel networks of the 1960s, and the urban warfare adaptations documented during the Battle of Fallujah. The room went completely still. The only sound was the low hum of the ventilation system. "He's not making it up," Corvin said quietly. "He's citing an entire military history that doesn't exist in our records." "It gets worse," Zion replied. The display shifted again. Section 4, Classified Applications and Ethical Considerations. General Theron's combat crest lifted slightly. "Ethical considerations?" Zion continued reading. "While siege tactics involving civilian population centers raise obvious moral concerns, historical precedent suggests that desperate defensive scenarios sometimes require strategies that violate standard rules of engagement. The atomic bombardments of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 represent the ultimate example of siege breaking through overwhelming force projection. The long-term consequences demonstrate why such methods remain restricted under modern galactic warfare conventions." War Coordinator Corvin shot to her feet so fast her chair scraped sharply across the floor. "He just referenced atomic weapons used on civilian targets," she said. "As a historical example," Zion confirmed grimly. "As casually as a textbook footnote." Analyst Voss's terminal chimed. "Ma'am, I'm receiving priority communications from Fleet Command. They want to know why restricted military archives were accessed using an Academy student account." "He didn't access our archives," General Valand said slowly. "These events aren't in our systems." The meaning settled over the room like poison in the air. Corvin activated a direct channel. "This is War Coordinator Corvin requesting immediate contact with Earth's diplomatic liaison. Priority Alpha." "Ma'am," Voss added, her voice tightening, "there's more." He ends the paper with recommended reading. 12 conflicts. 6 planetary bombardment strategies. And something he calls the Geneva Convention Violations Compendium, a practical guide to what not to do. The comm system crackled. A tired human voice answered, "Dr. Lakeland Okafor, Earth Diplomatic Corps. Do you have any idea what time it is?" "Dr. Okafor, this is War Coordinator Corvin at the Zenthari War Academy. We need to discuss one of your exchange students." A pause. Then, almost casually, "Liam? What did he do this time?" That tone, calm, familiar, sent a fresh wave of unease through the room. "Ma'am, he submitted an academic paper referencing military conflicts not present in our databases. He discusses atomic weapons used against civilian populations and outlines strategies that violate at least 15 galactic warfare conventions. There was a long silence on the line. Then, oh, that. Corvin felt her voice tighten. Dr. Okafor, we require an immediate explanation. Can we schedule a full briefing in the morning? Okafor asked. This is going to take time. And I'm going to need coffee. A lot of coffee. With respect, we may be facing a security threat. No, the human said, suddenly serious. You're not. A beat. You have something much worse. The line went quiet. You have a learning opportunity. The channel closed. In conference room Alpha Prime, 4 of the Academy's most senior military leaders stared at holographic analyses that should not have existed, wars that were never recorded, strategies that defied galactic law, compiled by a student who treated war crimes like homework material. General Lalonde spoke first. We need to inform the Galactic Military Council. And tell them what? Corrin asked. That humanity has an undocumented military history spanning 8,000 years? That their peaceful exchange student references atomic bombardment as if it's standard doctrine. Analyst Voss looked up from her terminal. There's something else, she said. I ran a linguistic profile on his writing. The structure. The tone. The way he assumes the reader already understands the context. She swallowed. This isn't someone trying to intimidate us. It reads like educational material. He sounds like he's trying to be helpful. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Somewhere in the residential wing, Liam was likely asleep, completely unaware that his assignment had just triggered the largest military intelligence crisis in Zenthri history. What happened next reshaped the galaxy, and not in a way anyone was prepared for. The briefing room felt cramped as 12 additional officials crowded around the table. Representatives from the Galactic Military Council, Fleet Command, and 3 intelligence agencies had arrived within hours of Dr. Okafor's warning. Ambassador Quinn Netter of the Helix Collective sat rigidly upright, bioluminescent markings flickering with restrained alarm. Dr. Leland Okafor entered carrying a steaming cup of coffee and a stack of data tablets high enough to block half her face. She looked remarkably calm for someone about to append galactic military assumptions. Before sitting, she spoke. Before we begin, you need to understand something fundamental. Liam is not military. He's not intelligence. He's not even studying political science. Corvin's throat sac expanded. Then how does he know about atomic bombardments and siege tactics that predate galactic civilization? Okafor took a sip of coffee. He watches documentaries, she said. And he reads. A lot. Military history is his hobby. The silence that followed was almost painful. Fleet Commander Jazz Reen of the Kavari Defense Force leaned forward. You're saying this level of tactical knowledge is recreational on Earth? Absolutely, Okafor replied, activating her first tablet. We have entire television networks dedicated to military history. Thousands of books, documentaries, podcasts, interactive simulations. She looked around the room at their stunned expressions. For us, she said calmly, this isn't classified knowledge. It's entertainment. Most human children, Dr. Okafor continued calmly, can name at least 3 major wars before they turn 10. General Van's claws scraped sharply across the surface of the table. Children. Oh yes, Okafor replied lightly, as if she were discussing gardening. We introduced the subject early. She took another sip of coffee. Popular video games include tactical simulations based on real historical battles. One called Total War allows players to recreate sieges from across human history. Another, Hearts of Iron, focuses on global conflicts from the 1930s and 1940s. Ambassador Netter's bioluminescent markings shifted to a deep, sickly purple. You mean the atomic weapon era? Among others, Okafor said evenly. Analyst Voss pulled up Liam's exam transcript. Dr. Okafor, Liam references something called the Geneva Convention Violations Compendium. Is that classified intelligence? Okafor nearly choked on her coffee. The Geneva Convention violations? She let out a small laugh. No, that sounds exactly like something Liam would create as a study guide. He's extremely organized. She set the cup down. The Geneva Conventions are international agreements that define the rules of war, what constitutes a war crime, how prisoners must be treated, how civilians are protected. Standard material. Standard. War Coordinator Corvin's voice faltered. Yes, Okafor replied without hesitation. Every human soldier learns them. Every officer studies past violations to understand what must never be repeated. It's basic military education. The room exploded into overlapping voices. Fleet Commander Relan argued with Ambassador Netter about classification failures. General Dallon scribbled notes at frantic speed. 3 intelligence officers whispered urgently into their communicators. Okafor waited patiently until the noise subsided. Then she activated another tablet. Now, about the historical references you couldn't find in your databases. Silence returned instantly. Stalingrad, she began. An 872-day siege. Over 1 million military casualties. Civilian losses remain uncertain. The city was destroyed, yet the defenders held. She swiped to the next entry. Thermopylae. 300 Spartan warriors delaying a force of roughly 100,000 for 3 days. Another swipe. D-Day. The largest amphibious invasion in human history. 150,000 troops deployed in a single operation. She looked around the table. These are not classified events. They're taught in elementary school. We have monuments, museums, annual commemorations. Liam likely learned about most of them before he turned 12. Ambassador Netter's lights flickered rapidly. You're describing casualty levels that would qualify as major galactic wars. How many such conflicts has humanity experienced? It depends how you define major, Okafor said, scrolling through her notes. Large-scale wars between multiple nations? Around 50 in recorded history. Smaller wars, civil conflicts, regional disputes. She gave a small shrug. Thousands. High Counselor Dern Katas, silent until now, leaned forward. When Earth joined the galactic community, your species was categorized as recently stabilized, newly emerged from planetary conflict. We were told you had achieved peace through diplomacy and technological progress. We did, Okafor replied, her tone growing more serious. Eventually. But it took time. And we learned along the way. How long is time? Fleet Commander Relan asked quietly. About 8,000 years of recorded warfare, she said. Give or take. The ventilation system hummed softly. A communicator beeped once and went still. General Dallon broke the silence. 8,000 years of continuous conflict. Different scales. Different technologies. Different motives, Okafor answered. But yes. Largely continuous. She folded her hands. We became very skilled at it. Captain Yel Sarin from the Ion Defense Corps raised a cautious hand. The atomic weapons Liam mentioned, how many times were they used in actual combat? Twice, Okafor said. Both times by the same nation. Both against civilian population centers. The intent was to end a global war. Her voice turned measured, almost clinical. The results were instructive. We decided not to repeat that. But you still possess such weapons, Ambassador Netter observed. Oh yes, she replied calmly. Thousands. Maintained by multiple nations. A faint, grim smile crossed her face. It's called deterrence theory. If everyone has the ability to destroy everyone else, no one wants to start the largest wars. She paused. It works. Most of the time. War Coordinator Corvin felt a chill travel along her exoskeleton. Dr. Okafor, what would you say is humanity's greatest military innovation? The answer came instantly. Learning to stop. No hesitation. No uncertainty. We realized total war was unsustainable, too destructive, too costly, too dangerous. So we developed alternatives: economic pressure, proxy conflicts, diplomacy, international law. She gestured toward the tablet displaying Liam's paper. All the wars he referenced. All the strategies. Even the violations. We study them to understand what must never happen again. The realization settled heavily over the room. Humanity had not reached peace through innocence. They had reached it through exhaustion, after mastering the art of war. Okafor finished the last of her coffee and stood. Now, regarding the emergency session you requested. I assume we'll be discussing revised first contact protocols. Before anyone could respond, every communicator in the room began sounding at once. Sharp beeps. Emergency signals. Red priority alerts. Codes that most present had never encountered. Analyst Voss looked up from her terminal, her expression drained of color. Ma'am, we're receiving urgent transmissions from 17 separate military commands across the sector. She swallowed. They all want the same information. A tense pause. They're asking about Earth's true military capabilities. Dr. Okafor smiled. It was not reassuring. And then the alarms began. Emergency klaxons echoed through the academy corridors as Okafor calmly activated her priority channel. The holographic display filled with incoming signals, fleet commands, intelligence bureaus, planetary defense networks, all demanding answers. What exactly was humanity hiding? She straightened her posture. This is Dr. Lakeland Okafor, she said evenly. Earth Diplomatic Corps. What? Corvin breathed. Dr. Okafor didn't answer out loud. She simply raised the comm unit and spoke with the calm, practiced ease of someone who had done this too many times. Connecting to Admiral Celine, Earth Defense Force. The hologram flickered, stabilized, and revealed a sharp-featured woman in a crisp uniform. Behind her stretched a massive command center, rows of glowing consoles, towering screens, and personnel moving with controlled urgency. Lakeland, Admiral Celine said. Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in far too long. I assume you've seen the alerts spreading through the galactic networks. Hard to miss, Okafor replied. 17 separate commands are suddenly very curious about Earth's defensive capabilities. Okafor glanced around the table at the gathered alien officials. Their faces, plates, crests, bioluminescent markings, were all shifting toward the same expression, unease. All because one exchange student wrote an honest exam paper, she added. War Coordinator Corvin stepped forward, forcing steadiness into her voice. Admiral, we need clarification regarding your species' military development. The information we received during first contact appears incomplete. Admiral Celine's expression didn't change, but something colder moved behind her eyes. Coordinator, she said evenly, first contact protocols required us to disclose our current military status and our recent conflicts. We complied fully. But you didn't mention the historical context, General Delon cut in. 8,000 years of warfare. Atomic deployments. Strategic doctrines that, by our assessment, surpass most galactic frameworks. Celine's reply came without hesitation. You didn't ask. The blunt honesty struck the room like a physical impact. Fleet Commander Reen kept his voice carefully controlled. Admiral, you must understand that such information is relevant to galactic security assessments. Is it? Celine leaned forward slightly. Commander, when your species joined the galactic community, did you provide detailed reports on every war you ever fought, every weapon you ever built, every doctrine you ever used? Reen stiffened. That's different. It isn't, Celine said. Corvin tried again, grasping for the point that still made sense to her. Your species didn't have, a history of total war. Dr. Okafor spoke quietly, filling the gap. You developed spaceflight before you developed the ability to destroy your own planet, she said. Most species did. Humanity is unusual because we achieved planet-killing capability before we achieved lasting peace. Ambassador Netter's bioluminescent patches pulsed fast, agitated. Dr. Okafor, the implications are staggering. If your species spent millennia perfecting warfare, what are your actual capabilities? Admiral Celine went silent. For a long moment, she didn't look at the council representatives at all. She turned slightly, addressing someone off-screen. Colonel Wu, she said. Bring up the comparative analysis. A new window opened inside the hologram. Charts and graphs began streaming across the display, force distribution, response timelines, industrial output projections, doctrinal summaries. Colonel James Wu's voice came through, calm and clinical. Current Earth Defense Force maintains approximately 2.3 million active personnel across terrestrial, orbital, and deep space commands. Primary doctrine emphasizes rapid response, technological superiority, and strategic deterrence. The numbers were large, but not impossible. They fit within the normal range for a spacefaring civilization. Then Wu continued. These figures represent peacetime posture. Historical modeling indicates that in a total war scenario, Earth's industrial capacity and population base could support expansion to approximately 200 million active personnel within 18 months, using production scaling techniques developed during our 1940s global conflict. The room went dead silent. Wu's tone stayed steady, almost indifferent. Additionally, while current Earth defense protocols comply with all galactic warfare conventions, historical archives contain tactical doctrines for scenarios not addressed by existing treaties. Urban warfare, guerrilla operations, asymmetric conflict, psychological operations, economic warfare, strategic resource denial. General Theron's combat crest extended fully. Strategic resource denial, he repeated, as if tasting the words. Scorched Earth protocols, Admiral Celine said simply. If you can't hold territory, you deny its use to the enemy. You destroy infrastructure. Contaminate water sources. Remove anything of strategic value. She didn't soften her tone. We used it against ourselves during internal conflicts. It works. Captain Sarin of the Ion Defense Corps finally spoke, choosing every word with care. Admiral, with respect, those capabilities sound less like defense and more like conquest doctrine. Celine didn't bristle. She didn't argue. Captain, she said calmly, every defensive doctrine can be inverted into an offensive one. The difference is intent and application. Her voice remained level, but the meaning behind it was razor-sharp. Humanity learned to wage total war because we had to. Humanity learned to avoid total war because we chose to. High Counselor Katas, who had been silent through most of the briefing, finally found his voice. Admiral, what happens if Earth stops choosing peace? The question settled over the room like toxic fog. Every being present understood this wasn't academic anymore. This was the real question, hidden behind the frantic red alerts and the sector-wide emergency communications. Admiral Celine didn't answer immediately. Nearly 30 seconds passed. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of hard experience, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what your people can do. Counselor, she said, Earth's doctrine for the last 80 years has rested on a simple principle: war should be fast, decisive, and leave enough intact to build peace afterward. She held eye contact with the camera. Our strategic framework assumes victory is meaningless if you destroy everything worth living for. Ambassador Netter pressed, unable to stop himself. And if that assumption changed? Admiral Celine's reply was slow and deliberate. If that assumption changed, she said, we would apply 8,000 years of accumulated knowledge, without those constraints. She paused, and when she continued her voice lowered softer, and somehow more absolute. Humanity didn't join the galactic community because we couldn't survive alone. We joined because we chose to. Her eyes didn't waver. And we have maintained that choice. War Coordinator Corvin felt her instincts screaming warnings along her spine. Admiral, she said tightly, are you suggesting Earth views galactic civilization as optional? Celine's expression remained composed. I'm suggesting Earth views everything as optional, Coordinator, she said. That's what free will means. Dr. Okafor stepped forward again, drawing their attention back to the origin of this crisis. Which brings us back to Liam's exam paper, she said. He wasn't trying to threaten anyone. He wasn't trying to showcase Earth's capabilities. She glanced at the horrified faces around the table. He was simply doing what humans do when they're being graded. Okafor's voice stayed gentle, almost apologetic. He was showing his work. Being academically thorough. To him, Dr. Okafor continued, discussing siege tactics and their historical use is no different than discussing farming methods. It's knowledge. It exists. So it should be shared. Analyst Voss hesitated. Even the classified sections? Especially those, Admiral Celine replied. She folded her hands on the desk in front of her. Do you know what Liam's classified examples actually were? Historical failures. Strategic miscalculations. Tactical decisions that created more problems than they solved. War crimes that achieved nothing except prolonging suffering. Colonel Wu's voice added steady clarification. The human approach to military education focuses as much on failure as success. Liam's reference to Geneva Convention violations wasn't a threat manual. It was a record of what must never be repeated. Understanding began to spread across the room, slow and heavy, like pieces of a complicated puzzle falling into place. Fleet Commander Reland spoke carefully. You're saying humanity approaches warfare as an academic discipline rather than an active doctrine. Our approach to warfare is historical, Dr. Okafor corrected gently. We study it. We analyze it. We document it. We teach it. Because we never want to forget how destructive we are capable of being. And the deterrence value, Admiral Celine added, is that everyone knows we remember. Ambassador Netter's bioluminescent glow shifted to a thoughtful blue. Admiral, hypothetically speaking, what would happen if another galactic power decided to test Earth's defenses? Celine's smile was sharp, almost surgical. Hypothetically, she replied, they would discover that humanity's greatest innovation wasn't learning how to wage war. She paused just long enough. It was learning how to end it quickly. Around the room, communication panels continued flashing with urgent signals. Across 17 star systems, military commands were recalculating their assumptions about a species they had labeled recently emergent and technologically developing. War Coordinator Corvin studied the displays, then looked at Dr. Okafor, then back to Admiral Celine's calm, unwavering expression. Dr. Okafor, she asked carefully, what exactly should we tell the other galactic powers? The truth, Okafor said simply. Humanity joined the galactic community as partners, not subjects. We've shared our knowledge, our culture, and our perspective. We've answered every direct question honestly. And if they find that unsettling? Ambassador Netter asked. Admiral Celine leaned back in her chair. Coordinator, humanity spent 8,000 years learning that the only thing worse than being feared is being underestimated. Her gaze remained steady. We're prepared for either. She gestured toward the holographic display showing Liam's exam. That paper reflects how an average human college student thinks about military strategy. He's not a specialist. He doesn't hold classified clearance. He's simply a student who enjoys history documentaries. The weight of that statement pressed down on everyone present. Now, Celine continued evenly, imagine what our actual strategists know. War Coordinator Corvin felt her breathing falter for a moment. Around the table, seasoned officers and intelligence experts were coming to the same realization. They had misunderstood the situation from the beginning. This wasn't a crisis triggered by humanity revealing hidden power. It was a crisis triggered by humanity casually referencing knowledge they assumed everyone already possessed. That distinction was far more unsettling. Dr. Okafor finished her coffee and gathered her tablets. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings of every classification, she said politely, I believe that concludes our briefing. She nodded toward the hologram. Admiral Celine, thank you. Always glad to assist, Celine replied. Then her image shifted toward Corvin. Please tell Liam he did excellent work. Thorough analysis. The transmission ended. Silence filled the briefing room. High Counselor Katas spoke first. We must contact the Galactic Council immediately. And say what? General Vallon asked. That our newest allies are peaceful, cooperative, and possess military knowledge that makes our best strategists look inexperienced? Ambassador Netter's glow shifted to contemplative green. That may, they said slowly, be the most accurate description available. Corvin looked around at the gathered officials, military leaders, intelligence analysts, diplomats. All accomplished. All respected. All suddenly aware that the universe was larger and more dangerous than they had believed only hours earlier. You know what unsettles me most, she said quietly. Liam probably has no idea any of this is happening. She let out a slow breath. He's likely in his dorm room reading about another historical conflict. Taking notes for next week. The thought was oddly comforting. And deeply terrifying. As the emergency session dissolved and officials hurried to contact their respective commands, one truth echoed through the halls of the Zenthari War Academy. The galaxy had spent decades building trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and diplomatic frameworks with humanity. No one had seriously asked what would happen if diplomacy failed. Now they had their answer. Across 17 star systems, military planners were adjusting their models, rewriting projections, and reassessing strategic balances. Because sometimes the most dangerous power in the room isn't the one eager for war. It's the one that has mastered it, and chosen peace anyway. Meanwhile, in his dormitory, blissfully unaware of the sector-wide alarm he had triggered, Liam was already working on his next assignment. A comparative study of defensive fortifications throughout history. He was particularly interested in the section on asteroid mining techniques and their potential use in orbital defense platforms. It was shaping up to be a very educational semester.